President Trump today celebrating red state primary wins and now focused on Republicans pulling off an upset in deep blue California. With 6 days until the election there and just 10% of the ballots in, there's no clear leader in what's become a record-busting money race in the fight for the governor's office. That's driven largely by my next guest, who, win or lose, is going down in the history books for spending a record-busting $195 million on ads. Democratic gubernatorial candidate Tom Steyer joins me now. We should note several other candidates in this race have also appeared on this network in recent weeks. It's good to see you, Tom. I think everybody wants to talk to you about money. It is record setting, what you're spending. Outside money, I should also say, is also setting records. And yet most polls haven't shown any candidate gaining support from even a quarter of California voters. So why do you think nobody is breaking through to the point where they feel confident that they're going to be in the top two next week?
Well, Chris, first of all, thank you for having me on the show. And second of all, focused on it. And I think in the last week or two, people are starting to, as you said, the election is on June 2, less than a week away, and people are starting to focus. And this election has come very much from confusion into clarity. And it's basically down to three people. There is a hard right Republican who's been endorsed by Donald Trump, which is Steve Hilton. There is a Democrat, a corporate Democrat who's taken lots of money from Chevron, from Meta, from Uber. That is Xavier Becerra, who is basically the status quo candidate. If you don't want change, he's the person. And there's the progressive candidate who wants to take on the corporate special interest, who wants to change things, who wants to drive down costs for working Californians, and that's me. And this race has simplified, honest to goodness, into that in the last week or two.
I should say that Xavier Becerra, and you've been going back and forth with him about the Chevron money. He says it's an outright lie that he's taken huge amounts of money. And again, we could go back and forth, but I do want to talk about the relatively low turnout when you look at, for example, what's happening in South Carolina. One theory is, and I know you know this, Dems are waiting to see who might break out. They're still worried that there's unexpected Republican strength and it could shut out Dems in this jungle primary. What does it say, even that a single Republican backed by President Trump is polling so high in California and could grab one of the two spots?
Well, I think that's very possible. But the idea that two Republicans could be the two who get through to the next round is absolutely remote. It's virtually impossible.
Is that what your internal polling is assuring you?
I think everybody's polling, public, private. Look, the truth of the matter is Steve Hilton is polling somewhere between 20-25%. And there is a group of Republicans in the state of California who want to vote for a Republican, and that's normal. But I think that's not the question in this race. I think that is a complete sideshow, Chris. The question in this race is who wants to change California, who wants to take on the corporate special interests. The big issue in California is people can't afford to live here anymore. And the question is, who is going to drive down costs so working Californians can afford to live here, can afford to buy a house, can pay their bills, can get health care. That is the question in this race, and that is the question that voters are confronting. It's been confusing up to now, but is extremely simple at this point.
Well, as we mentioned, early voting, a little bit slow, not necessarily unusual for a race of this type, but when you have 2 million out of 23 million that have only been returned so far, what can you do between now and Tuesday that could potentially break up the race?
You know, I have seen my task on this, Chris, as being very simple. And that is, I try to outwork all the other candidates. And I measure that by how many Californians I look in the eye, how many people I listen to, how many people I interact with directly. Because,
and you know what they say in response to that? They say you're trying to buy the race. You're trying to buy the governor's office. So what do you say to them?
I say that there's a record amount of money being spent against me, an absolute record from the corporations. And I also say, look, I'm the only billionaire on the ballot, but I am very far from the only billionaire in this race. The billionaires and the corporations have lined up against me, and they're supporting everybody but me. And in particular, they're supporting Xavier Becerra. And so in this race, it's coming down to, do you want change in California? And do you want to take on the electric monopoly and the oil companies who are gouging you at the pump? Do you want single payer healthcare? I say yes. Javier said yes in public, but then in private, he assured people he wouldn't. This is a very simple race about change. And, there's been 60 people on the ballot. There was all that controversy about Eric Swalwell. But in the end, this race has simplified into a change versus no change race, into a people versus the corporations race. And that's exactly where we are. And that's exactly what we're seeing.
Back when I lived in California, and it was a long time ago, but folks always said when California sneezes, the rest of the country gets a cold, that they set essentially the agenda, certainly on the left, on the Democratic side. What would the California that Governor Steyer heads do that you would want to say, California's going to lead the way in this?
Well, Chris, what we talk about on the campaign and what I talk about every day is shared prosperity. California is half the growth in the United States. We have a very high average income. We also have the highest poverty rate in the United States. We have the greatest inequality in the United States. And this race is about, from my standpoint, representing working people who are being shut out of the California dream. And so what would it look like? It would look like we brought down costs so that people can afford to buy a house. It would look like a state where we had, again, a leading education system, where we supported the teachers and the kids to have a leading education system. It would be a state where we broke the power of the electric monopolies who charge us twice as much as the average in the United States. It would be a state where we went back to building houses so we could drop those costs, so rents would come down, and so that young people could afford to buy a house. It would be a state that didn't just work on the top line and for the richest people, but we had a state that worked for the working people who built this state, who make this state run on a daily basis, and who are suffering because they cannot afford to pay their bills at the end of the month. That is what success looks like. Continuing to succeed and to compete and to grow, but to sharing the results of that and the prosperity in a completely different way.
6 more days and we'll know. Tom Steyer, thank you so much for coming on the program.
Chris, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.